Look okay. I mean,
Oh, you look great.
Thanks. Welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Every time I hear that intro, I say, wow, that guy Mike Altman must be something. But then I realize it's me, and we get back to reality. But today we have a phenomenal guest. It's a guest whose story is really made for movies. It's a story about the Eastern Europe Jews who were fighting the Nazis, the Jewish resistance, families who left without anything, taken by the Nazis, and who came to America to try and build a new life. So really, it's a story of grit, of taking risks, of resilience. And today's guest is Martin Hausvater, if I am correct.
yes, yes.
Uh, the story starts with his grandfather Martin, who had a son Harvey, who then had a son Martin, correct?
That's correct. That's
And they
correct.
went. The grandfather, was in the construction industry in New York City, a rough and tumble world, and really the story starts. Well, I guess it starts in Eastern Europe, but I guess it really starts when you, Martin, had a stroke and were in a
Right. And
coma.
then it takes you back.
Right. And in that coma, you were in a coma, correct?
I'm not in a coma. What happened was I started off with the daily life in New York City construction, the way my father taught me and everything. The key difference is, or was, the fact that I used to wake up, get in the car, get ready to go to the city, ready for fighting and so forth with everybody, whether it be a client or whether it be my own guys. But to pep me up, to get the adrenaline flowing, I used to listen to a song by Guns N' Roses called Welcome to the Jungle. And that song I used to crank up on the radio. People would be looking at me, in other cars. And that's what I listened to all the way to the city, um, over and over again. So it starts off with me living the life of being in the world of New York City construction, and then I suffer a stroke after an argument. I am taken to the hospital, and they put me out, and it was about a 5.5 hour surgery. And while I was out, it takes you back to 1905 Romania, and that's where my grandfather was an 8-year old, and he was part of a large family.
So while you were out having surgery, your mind went back to the family.
Yes, yes.
Fascinating.
And what happened was my grandfather, he was the youngest child of a number of siblings. And my great grandfather, he was an Orthodox rabbi. It was an Orthodox home. And back then they had, what they used to do is if you couldn't afford to keep the whole family together, to better everybody, there were certain children you would put into an apprenticeship with another family. They would live and learn a trade. Today they call it abandonment or whatever they would call it, but back then it was a normal custom if you just couldn't afford to survive as a full family.
And what year was this
This is 1905
when he went into apprenticeship?
when he went into apprenticeship. He was 8 years old. My great grandfather took him from Romania to Hungary, and he lived with a family that the man of the house was a coppersmith. And he used to bring in children from all over the world, 8, 10 kids, whatever it may be. And they used to live in bunks. And during the day, they would go to school. And when they would come home, they would work in the shop and learn a trade. And he blended them with older people that knew how to install and all that kind of stuff. So, with that said, he learned the trade. When he turned 17, he wound up joining the cavalry. World War I was about to begin. We're talking 1914. He ultimately becomes a major. He is in a battle that they get captured. He winds up in a POW camp. And, while as a child he faced anti-Semitism living in Budapest, Hungary, and then he faces even more while he's a POW. Over time, he gets closer and closer with his men. They stand up for him, even though they're not Jewish. But he was a very strong man, and he knew how to fight physically. And what happened was one individual they became close with, this man named Elias. And Elias was from Czechoslovakia. And after the war, my grandfather really had no place to go. So he went with Elias to Czechoslovakia to live with his family for a little while. And at that time, he was set up on a blind date with my grandmother at a shul, at a Shabbat service. So the two of them met, they get married, and now they live with my other great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, who's also an Orthodox rabbi. And my great-grandfather gets my grandfather a job working on a milk can factory assembly line. My grandfather never liked it. He was very frustrated with the whole thing, and he saw there was no future in it. And somebody came to him with a concept. The Hungarian government was devaluing the currency. And so in other words, if, for argument's sake, you had a $100 bill, now the $100 bill is worth $20, unless you pay the Hungarian government, let's call it $50. And they'll put a red stamp on that $100 bill. Now that $100 bill is worth $80. That's basically the formula that, just to kind of explain what took place. So what happened was my grandfather decided, he knew how to work with metal. He could create a stamp. And what he would do is he would print his own money. Or print his own stamp, I should say. I'm sorry. Print his own stamp. And him and my grandmother, and at the time, my aunt, who was a baby, they moved to Hungary. And he started printing money or printing stamps on cash for people.
So now
and he made.
So now that money is worth $80, but you don't have to pay the 50.
You know, pay 50. Let's say he's charging 25.
Right. It's great.
And he made million. It's a great business as long as you don't get caught.
Right.
And there were a couple of. I won't get into too much because the book goes into more detail. But there was an instance where he almost got in trouble. That's when he knew he was done. He wound up going into stone sculpting. And what he did was he wound up, he was an artist. He knew how to draw, he knew how to paint, and he wound up going to stone sculpting and selling, his sculptures to people who were at fairs and so forth. And what he did was, the white like glue stick that men used to use when they got a cut on their face after shaving.
Sure.
What he used to do is that's like a plastic almost. He used to melt that down and put it into molds. And when it hardened up, it would be, it could be a statue of Jesus. It could be an angel. It could be whatever. And then he used to take paint and make little veins in it and everything else. And he used to sell them as statues of stone. And it was a great business.
He was a real entrepreneur.
He did what he had to do. It was all survival.
Right. Until such time as you, as a Jew, being an entrepreneur wasn't an option anymore.
Exactly. He did what he had to do to survive. And at that time, my father was born. My father was born in Hungary. He then decided he was going to move the family to Vienna. And at that point, he had a lot of money. he bought a penthouse apartment in a building not too far from the Danube River.
What year is this? This is all pre-Hitler?
This is 1930,
Okay.
roughly 1930,
So the
31.
shit in a few years, the shit's gonna hit the fan.
Right. Now, again, he was a very, very strong man. He used to be able to take a 1 inch thick steel bar and bend it around his neck.
Wow.
And this is just a rough and tough upbringing, constant fighting, Jewish resistance, and everything that went along with it. It's just that he did what he had to do to make sure his family was getting, you know, the right life.
Right.
He did what he needed. So they lived similar to, say, The Sound of Music, but in an apartment building, let's say on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, that comparison. They had a chauffeur, they had a governess, they had cleaning staff. And what happened was the Nazis started to come in the mid-30s. And he tried to get out, and it was just, there was so much corruption in the government. And his goal was to go to Ohio and live in Ohio with the family. It just didn't work out. Couldn't get visas to come here and whatever. So one day, my grandmother's parents were coming to visit, and they were coming by train. And my grandfather and the family were going to meet them at the train station. And my father noticed from a distance, somebody was thrown from the train. Turns out it was my great-grandmother.
Wow.
And there were Nazis on the train, and my grandfather just, it was fit to be tied. End result is my grandfather gets recruited by a friend to join the Jewish Underground. All meetings are in the basement of a bakery in Vienna. And he learns about the do's and don'ts. And, it's almost like all sorts of spy network stuff and trying to figure out what to do, how to do it. And they have a whole network throughout Europe because they knew the Nazis were coming. They knew that eventually everything is going to blow up and they needed to defuse it. A riot was going to be taking place. This is now 1938. A riot was going to take place, and it was the Jewish veterans of World War I who had their pitchforks and bats, and they were going to be taking on the Gestapo, who had machine guns. Now, I don't need to tell you who was going to win that fight. And my grandfather was warned to stay away by the Jewish Underground. Like, it's a losing battle. Don't even bother. Right. My grandfather, though, had friends that were going to be fighting, so he insisted he was going to be part of it. So he took a steel ball, and what he did was he welded a chain to it. So it's almost like, a mace.
Yeah.
And he wound up killing 3 Nazis. Now he was arrested by the Viennese police who broke up the riot, and he was taken to a jail cell, and he was going crazy. He actually wanted to kill more. Taken to jail, in jail, he calms down, and the police captain comes in, explains to him that the SS are on their way. They'll be here in a few hours, and they're coming to execute you for what you did. I want to wish you the best of luck. The captain happened to be a friend, and he left the jail cell door open.
Wow.
My grandfather escaped. He went home, packed a bag, left the family, because the family maintained Hungarian citizenship. When they moved to Vienna, they tried to get Austrian citizenship, but again, there was so much corruption, they couldn't get that citizenship. So the fact that they were Hungarian citizens, they couldn't be touched by the Nazis. Just the way it was, international law. So my grandfather went back to Hungary to live with his sister on a farm. And, the story goes deeper and deeper and deeper into what transpired over time. And ultimately, my grandmother who didn't know my grandfather was part of the Jewish underground, it was kept secret, figured it all out, made a deal to donate all of their money in exchange for passage to the United States for my grandfather and the rest of the family. They left everything behind.
Right.
So my grandfather, I mean, his journey was quite interesting. And again, I don't want to spoil it. His journey, though, took him from Hungary to France to London to Liverpool. And then from Liverpool, he was put on a ship, the Britannic. And my grandmother, my father, and my aunt escaped through Germany, actually, went to Hamburg. And they were on a ship called the USS Washington. And the two of them met a few weeks apart, arrived in New York, and they tried to make a life for themselves
So they arrived in New York with nothing.
with nothing.
And
Nothing.
how many kids other than your father?
One other, my aunt. So they arrived in New York, but my grandfather knew how to work with metal. And he also brought a couple statues with him that he had carved. Stone statues that, just they're made from white Carrara marble and whatever. And there was a cardinal named Cardinal Spiegel from the Archdiocese, who helped my grandfather. That's a whole nother story in the book. But the bottom line is that he gave my grandfather money for the statues and to help him get back on his feet. And what happened was they lived in a studio apartment in Borough Park. And my grandfather ultimately decides he's going to buy a sheet metal company. Air conditioning, heating, all that kind of stuff. And they're doing these stores in the area, and they're doing homes and so forth, nothing major. And two mobsters come in from New York City. We'd like to make you a big company. We want to take you under our wing. We like the work you do. So my grandfather made a deal cautiously with them. And ultimately,
he knew who they were, and he also knew of the strings that any kind of help would entail.
Exactly. So he wound up working with them. He wasn't going around shooting anybody. That's something he didn't want to do. But one thing that was very important to him was to keep my father away as much as he could.
And your father is Harvey.
Harvey. He wound up going into the business, and he wound up, he learned the business. He learned about these people. There was some tension between my father and my grandfather for a little while, where my father broke away, started his own company up in Albany.
If I understand, your father was a little more aggressive in terms of his relationships with the mob.
Yes. What happened was, after a nervous breakdown in the early 50s, he wound up coming back home and living with the family again. And he wound up joining the company and working with my father. And he ultimately became close with the mobsters against what my grandfather wanted.
Sure.
And my father, he used to run to Cuba with these guys. He used to run to Miami with these guys. It was all about, they would take clients with them, and they would gamble, and there were girls, and there was drinking, and just a good time. So my grandfather was totally against it. My father was having the time of his life. And unfortunately, he got more and more involved as time went on. He was not going around killing people. What he did was he used them to his advantage. I want this project. I want that project. And I'll give you your cut, and just get me the work. That's what he basically used them for. Or if there was going to be a union problem, he knew who to call to make the union problem go away. And in the early 70s, he decided that the commute from Long Island to Brooklyn was becoming a bit much. They were located in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn, which was just it was becoming a very bad area, a lot of drug dealing going on and so forth. And he wanted out. So he winds up leaving the business and he goes into real estate development. And he did that for a number of years.
Now he was able to
And
just leave the business with, whatever strings he had attached to the mob. He was able to just leave the business.
yes, they completed their work, whatever had to be done. But he just felt that it was becoming too much. And there were two loyal workers that were, or mechanics that were part of my grandfather, my father. And the end result is he gave them the business. He just let them have it. No charge. Just
Wow.
take the business and whatever you make of it, do it. So he really, you know, he went to real estate development, started building homes up in Westchester on Long Island, and he did a couple of major developments. And he was working with a bank that is no longer around. But the end result is it became a very anti-Semitic climate. The board was ultimately became very anti-Semitic against him, accusing him of all sorts of things that weren't true, and he just decided he had enough. So he was going to retire. He bought a piece of property and decided to build a home on the North Shore in Brookville. The house, it was a tremendous house, and they were doing stonework in the house. And the electrician came to him and asked him, would it be okay? I'm doing a house in the area for somebody else. And they're confused on what they want as far as stone goes, but I think they would love what you're doing here. And my father said, of course, bring them in. I've got to purchase more. He was buying he bought, I think, like 4,000 or 5,000 square feet to start, and then he was going to buy another few thousand feet after, depending on, what he decided to do with layouts and so forth. So the couple came to the house. They looked at it. They decided they loved it. My father explained to them, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get here. I don't want phone calls over and over again. Just when it gets here, I'll give it to you. They'd never discussed price. It was just a handshake. The stone arrived. The couple came over and they loved it. Loved it. And they said, how much do we owe you? And my father said, let me just think for a second. And what he thought about was how the wife tortured him, calling him almost daily, where's my stone? I can't wait to get my stone. I want my stone. So he threw a price at them.
It's worth a lot of markup.
And what happened was their response was cash or check.
Really?
And he thought to himself, he marked it up 400%.
Thought to himself, that's a pretty good business.
And that's exactly what he thought.
Right.
And then he started going into this, and he started pursuing stone and tile work as a subcontractor. At the time, I was in college, and then I joined him. And then I got pulled into the business, and that I learned the business from him.
Right.
And the teachings, the things he taught me, you couldn't learn in school.
So now the
You
stone
could
and
learn
tile
working.
business, you didn't have any connections to organized crime, but you still had to deal with the people who were commercial real estate, who you were selling to, who probably in many ways were almost worse, except they wouldn't kill you.
Connections to everybody. That doesn't mean you're doing anything illegal.
Right. All right.
Just because I know Joe and Joe is connected doesn't mean I'm going out on a killing spree with the guy
No,
or
of course.
dealing drugs or prostitutes, whatever. Just you happen to know the guy.
Right.
And that guy can get you work as if you hired him as a salesman.
Right.
That's really what it came down
When
to.
you get the work, you pay a commission.
Exactly.
Right.
My father used to tell me there are no such thing as favors. I'll do you a favor and I'll get you the project.
No.
We never believed in that. You get us a project, even if we're going to lose money, we pay you what you do.
So I know,
Those
so in my business, we pay salespeople 40% of our net. What was the vig when someone would turn you on to a job?
We paid anywhere from 3 to 5%.
That's it. Of the
That's it.
price of the
Of the contract value.
Okay.
So if there were change orders along the way, whether they reduced the contract value or added or increased it,
They got their piece.
they got their piece. It was a fair deal.
Yeah.
They did what they were supposed to do, and if there was problems, with the client, they're not paying their bills, you want your money, go call the client. You brought them in.
Right. And
But
you
we never
didn't.
asked questions. If we got the check the next day, you never ask questions as
Right.
to how'd you do it.
Of course. They just had a good
My f-
conversation.
exactly. My father used to be adamant. Don't ask. Don't ask questions. When I first got into this business, I was just like, oh, who's he with? Oh, how's he connected? My father would be, don't ask.
Right.
You don't know.
The less you know, the less you can ever have to tell.
Exactly. And my father, I mean, he had his run-ins where there was a contract out on his life at one time because the mob thought he was talking when he did not have any knowledge. The FBI was all over him because they wanted him to tell a story. They had pictures of him having lunch with somebody. That somebody saw another individual in the restaurant. This was on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx.
Okay. Say no more.
And they both walked over to the table, and my father was just introduced to this individual. And all of a sudden, the FBI was taking pictures, and it became
He's connected.
he knows something. He knows something. He knows something. And if he doesn't know something, let him make something up. But we need a story to put this guy away. My father didn't know anything, and he told everybody he didn't know anything. And the end result was the mob just felt, it's easier to eliminate and not take any chances. And they put a contract out on him. It was a very difficult time for the family. It's all in the book.
So now, what happened then?
He had to have certain individuals come to vouch for him that he knew, and the contract was removed.
Right.
But could you imagine? You wake up one morning, you go outside, and your father's car is all shot up.
Right. Yeah, that's the neighbors must have been surprised.
Yes, to say the least.
Right. Right. So now you continue to grow in the business.
I continued to grow in the business. I got out of it for a little while working for a real estate developer, but overall, I've always been in the New York City construction industry. And it's, a rough and tumble industry. It really is. There's no industry, no construction industry in this country like New York City construction. The skin has to be very, very thick. And you have to wake up every morning and be ready for a fight.
Right. And
Every morning.
and you'd have those fights.
Yes, and that ultimately put me in the hospital.
So now, even when before you had your stroke and you were dealing with guys on a day-to-day basis, were you still seeing anti-Semitism?
I only saw it a few times. My father saw it a lot more. My father was a very tough, tough man. There's only a few things that were important to him in life. His family came first, his friends, then Judaism and Israel. That was what was important to him in life. And he faced anti-Semitism a lot more than I did. My grandfather faced it more than he did, probably. My father, when he was in the Navy, you know how tall those naval ships are. There was an anti-Semitic scene going on where these two guys were trying to harass him. And he did a military press, lifting one of them over his head from the top deck of the ship and threw him into the ocean.
That's good.
Just,
So
it was all
when
about
they,
fighting back. And then in 1978, 79, there was going to be a march with the Skokie neo-Nazis.
sure.
He came home from work one day, it was Thursday or Friday, with a bag of baseball bats. And my mother asked him, "What are you doing with the bats?" And he grabbed a suitcase and said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to Chicago. From Chicago, we're going to rent a car and go to Skokie." I'm like, she's like, "Who? What? What are you doing?" Well, those sons of bitches are not going to march. In my country, my kids are not going to have to see what I saw. I'm going to bust their heads. And he was bringing, Anthony and Frankie and Richie and this one and that one.
Right.
And they were all prepared to go. And my mother was like, you could get yourself killed or end up in jail or worse. I mean, and he's like, "I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to stop this march." And the end result is March got canceled because they didn't have permits to march. So it
Right.
got canceled. So he never went. But he was prepared to go.
It's you know what? And unfortunately, we're seeing some of the same things today. But that's a whole nother story. So now, where do you want to now? The story is continuing. You still have the stone and tile business.
Right now, I'm doing more consulting work
Okay.
because I don't have the strength I used to have. It's just, I was set back quite a bit. So
Right.
therefore, I'm doing consulting work and, just trying to survive
Now,
like everybody else.
your story and the book, and tell people if they want to find. Give me the name of the book and where people can find it.
Book is called Hausvater, Hausvater, and you can find it on Amazon. It's available in hardcover and Kindle.
Terrific. Now,
We're also working on an audio book, but that's going to be down the road.
so now, ultimately, your story has so many different facets from the Nazis, World War I to World War II, construction, Judaism, uh, you name it. You know, your story is compelling. Where do you want to take it? What would you like to see happen with it?
I would like to share the story with all that I can share it with, whether it becomes a movie or a series or just I'm working on a second book now because this book ends with me leaving the hospital and then it's what happens day two. But, just because one is Jewish doesn't have to mean that the feeling is weak.
Mm,
Jews fight back. There's this thinking that Jews are weak, and if they see something going on that's wrong, they should just walk away, and just as my mother would say, poo poo.
well,
Uh,
I liken it to uh, sheep being led to the slaughter. In in Nazi Germany, the Jews saw what was going on and just said, can't get any worse, and we'll just live with it, and didn't fight back for the most part.
right.
And you see similar things happening today, whether it's on college campuses or just leaders in Congress. And to your point, Jews need to toughen up.
That's exactly. I mean, I learned this recently that the Warsaw Ghetto, okay, the Jewish resistance there fought the Nazis longer than certain countries in Europe. The Nazis did not take Warsaw overnight like they expected to.
Right.
There was a Jewish resistance. And if we're not going to protect ourselves and our families, who is?
Nobody.
We
Nobody.
just, we got to fight back. We
Agreed.
can't be nimble about things and just say, "Oh, it's all going to go away." As my father used to say, God helps those who help themselves.
Well, you look at, again, just to bring it back to current events, you look at the current favorite for mayor of New York, who's no fan of the Jews, who's no fan of Israel, who actually has made anti Semitic comments, and yet the Jews are voting for him. Not all of them, but he's going to become our next mayor. And you would like to see the Jews stand up and open their mouths, but yet they don't.
You know, what the problem is, people don't know history. That's the problem.
And what happens when you don't
And
know history?
you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah,
And what happened was there were a lot of Jews that supported Hitler in the early
yeah, yeah.
1930s in Germany. And when the Nazis came calling and sending these Jews to concentration camps, their response was like, wait,
We
I'm
voted for
German.
you.
I'm German. I supported Hitler.
Right.
And they don't care. What's going to happen is if Mamdani wins, the Muslim Brotherhood would follow. And then this country, if they think they have problems now, they're going to have major, major problems later.
I cannot agree with you more. And I don't know what, you wonder, some people say, if you vote this way, you're getting what you deserve. But unfortunately, so is everybody else who had a brain.
That's the problem.
Yes,
That's the problem.
big problem. Big
You know,
problem.
when you use the word occupation, let's look at just basic physics. Basic physics. How is it that the Jews were not in Israel before the Palestinians? The Al-Aqsa Mosque was built the year 700, 800, around there, give or take. It sits on top of Solomon's temple. Physically, how could that take place
Right.
if the Palestinians were there first? I just need somebody to explain that to me.
Yeah, no
And I
question.
can't get an explanation.
Yeah, of course. I think, yeah, no, if this happens the way it seems like it's going to happen, it's going to be some difficult times for New York City, and you see similar things happening all around the country, and you see it in our own federal government, where people who hate, or let's not say hate, but who have a problem with Jews are in leadership positions, and those leadership positions on the progressive side seem to be getting stronger, not weaker. So, you see all the New York politicians falling in line, although so far, what's his name? Schumer has resisted, but I think today two high profile Democrats in New York backed Mandani, and it's like, what the hell are you doing?
It's because everyone's looking out for their own
That's right.
self-interests.
That's right. Power,
And
power and position before your own people.
and what normally happens then is things come back to haunt you.
Well, Schumer's
Things
going to
come
get
back to
kicked
haunt
out.
you.
He's gonna back Mandani eventually, but he's gonna lose his election. He's gonna lose his speakership. Yeah, it all goes. My wife always says karma's a bitch.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting time. So I've had guests like over the last few months talking about anti-Semitism on campus, and our conversation has kind of morphed towards the Jewish condition. But I think you as a Jew and me as a Jew, I mean, that's what else can you talk about?
Exactly right. It's very, very frustrating, especially when you see Jews in these protesting rallies and whatever, promoting the hatred against Israel. The biggest problem that we're facing is that the Holocaust survivors
Are
are
dying.
weaning down.
Yeah,
They're dying off.
yeah.
And anybody that's alive is in their late 80s, 90s, whatever. There's nobody to tell the story. But if Israel was around in the 30s and 40s, there would have been a place for the Jews to escape, and then the Holocaust may not have taken place.
Right.
If we don't have Israel, we don't have that option. And
Agreed.
then we face the same problems that we had back then. There
Agreed.
were about 16 million Jews on Earth prior to the Holocaust. We're at about 15.8 right now. We didn't even get back full cycle yet, and this is what we're dealing with.
Well, we have that old saying, "Never again," which is
Yes.
it's words, it's platitudes. I mean, I hate to say, but it's bullshit because never again, it's happening again. So what are you going to do about it? And unless we have strong leaders, I mean, you look at the UN, which should be a real estate development instead of what it is. But, you know, they hate Israel. People people just tend to hate Israel and tend to hate Jews. And that's what we as Jews need to realize and come to terms with.
I happen to agree with you. I didn't want to make this political,
Eh,
but when
I
they
always
say,
do.
well, when they say, like, for example, the Jews own Hollywood,
Mm.
the Jews own Hollywood, the Jews own Wall Street. Well,
Banking.
why is it, why is it that the Jews are so heavily involved in Hollywood and in banking? Well, you got to analyze it. You got to know your history. There were a lot of Jews that wanted to break into the arts in the 1920s, before, after, whatever. And there were very few that were permitted, like Al Jolson was permitted. So what these Jews do? Out of necessity, they moved out west and they opened up Hollywood. They created Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, Paramount. All these were designed or built by Jews. They did what they had to do.
Right.
As far as banking goes, there was a guy named Goldman, and he tried to get a job at some of these firms
You
on Wall
couldn't.
Street. He couldn't, but he had connections for money and he had connections that needed money. So he put them together and would make a commission. He brought his son-in-law in and they opened a firm called Goldman Sachs. It's Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns, all these companies came about because of anti-Semitism. When you really analyze it, it was all about anti-Semitism. And,
What?
the Jews have always been, having to get creative. And why do we have the ability to get creative? Because our parents always pushed education.
That's right. That's right.
It's all about education.
Absolutely. So Ohika Castle
Of course.
and the story of Otto Kahn and where that golf course came from. He couldn't get into a club. He was a Jew.
Right.
It's well, listen, I could have this conversation all day, but
Me too.
we need to end, but I would love to have you back on at some point to
I
get
would
an
welcome
idea
it.
of where you're going with the book and hopefully with some future movie or TV movie or docudrama. But I think it's a great story, and I think someone at some point will pick it up.
Well, I hope so, and I appreciate your time and welcoming me on this, and I would welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation.
Terrific. As would I, Martin. Thank you, and I'll speak to you soon.
You got it. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop us a review. We'll be back soon with more insights, experts, and conversations that make you think. See you next time. Do you ever wonder where curiosity meets conversation?